Can you really beat the stock market? It's the ultimate question in finance, isn't it? And for decades, the smart folks in academia have had a pretty clear, really powerful answer. It's a theory that's pretty much dominated finance for a century. But is it the whole truth? Let's dig in.
The official answer really boils down to this. Is the market basically a perfect, all-knowing genius? Does it know more than you, me, and every other investor on the planet combined? Well, there's this huge theory called the efficient markets hypothesis, or EMH, and its answer is a big, resounding yes. The idea is actually pretty simple. The second any new information hits the public, a press release, an earnings report, the market price adjusts instantly. Poof, there's no edge to be found. So here's the bottom line, the core message of the theory. Don't even try. You might think you're clever, you might think you found some little secret nobody else has seen, but the market already knows. It has already priced in every single hope, every fear, all the data. It wins. Every time. It's a really clean, elegant theory. It makes a lot of sense. But there's a problem. A really big 25-year-long problem. How does this beautiful theory about an unbeatable market explain a guy like this? This is David Swensen. And starting back in 1985, he took over Yale University's endowment. And he didn't just beat the market, he absolutely crushed it, consistently, for over a quarter of a century. So was he just the luckiest person on Earth for 25 straight years? Or does his success maybe point to a little crack in this supposedly perfect theory? To solve that puzzle, first, we have to really understand why this idea of a perfectly smart market is so convincing in the first place. And trust me, the logic behind it is, well, it's pretty elegant. And this isn't some new idea cooked up in the age of supercomputers. Way, way back in 1889, a guy named George Gibson described the market as this kind of giant voting machine, where the best intelligence, the smartest, most informed people, are all constantly casting votes with their money, pushing the price to its one true, correct value. And this process has been driven by a relentless, absolutely cutthroat race for information. I mean, in the 1840s, you had traders using carrier pigeons to get news just hours before anyone else. Then came the telegraph. And today, it's high-speed algorithms trading in microseconds. The incentive to be first is so huge that it forces the market to be incredibly, incredibly efficient. Okay, but what if there's a way to look like a genius without actually being one? What if the very numbers we all use to measure success can be manipulated? What if they can hide a catastrophe that's just waiting to happen? Meet the Sharpe ratio. Now, this is supposed to be the great equalizer. It's like an investor's report card. See, it doesn't just look at how much money you made, it measures your returns against the amount of risk you took. A high Sharpe ratio is supposed to prove you're not just a lucky gambler making wild bets. It's supposed to prove you're genuinely skilled. But let's ask a cynical question for a second. What if your goal isn't to be a great investor, but just to look like one for long enough to get really rich off fees before the whole thing blows up? Well, believe it or not, there's a playbook for that. First, you find rare lottery ticket type wins, and you sell off that potential for a little bit of cash right now. Second, you use that cash to paper over any small, regular losses, so your performance looks incredibly steady and smooth. But here's the hidden trick. Third, you secretly take on a massive, massive risk of a total wipeout, a really rare but absolutely devastating event. For years, your Sharpe ratio looks amazing, until that hidden time bomb finally explodes. And this isn't just some abstract theory. This is a real number. $43 million. This is the perfect and tragic illustration of the danger. The Art Institute of Chicago invested that much money with a hedge fund called Integral Investment Management. And guess what? The fund had one of the highest Sharpe ratios in the entire industry. But they were playing this exact game. And in 2001, the market took a dive, the time bomb went off, and the Art Institute lost almost everything. So, if the numbers can be tricked, what about just, looking at the charts? The problem there is our own brains. We are hardwired to see patterns and find meaning, even in what might be pure total chance. This brings us to a really core idea in efficient markets, the random walk. The picture is simple. A stock's price movements are as unpredictable as the staggering steps of a drunk person walking away from a lamppost. The best guess for where they'll be tomorrow is right where they are today because their next step is completely random. So take a look at this.
One of these charts shows over 100 years of the actual US stock market. The other one, a computer generated it by basically rolling dice. Can you tell which is which? Our minds are desperate to see trends and stories and those classic head and shoulders patterns in both of them, even though we know one of them is just meaningless noise. Okay, let's step back for a second. We've got this powerful theory that says the market is an unbeatable genius. But we also have people like David Swensen who seem to do just that. We've got numbers that can be tricked, and we've got charts that fool our own eyes. So, what is going on? Let's solve this paradox. And here's the resolution. The efficient markets hypothesis. It isn't actually wrong. It's just not the whole story. The best way to think about it is that it's a half-truth, and it's the other half where things get really interesting.
So let's go back to our drunk at the lamppost. On the left, you've got that pure random walk. He's totally free. He can wander anywhere. But now, on the right, imagine the same drunk, but this time he's tied to the lamppost with a really long, really loose elastic band. He can still wander a long, long way in any direction, but eventually that elastic is going to start pulling him back toward the post.
The real market is like that drunk with a loose elastic band. In the short term, day to day, month to month, its movements are almost completely random. But over the very long term, there seems to be this force, kind of like that elastic band, pulling it back towards some fundamental value. And this idea has a name. It's called mean reversion. So what does this all mean for us? Well, first, the market is highly efficient, but it's not perfect. Second, trying to outsmart it day by day is a fool's errand for most of us. Third, simple numbers like the Sharpe ratio can be incredibly dangerous traps. And finally, real skill in investing, the kind David Swensen had, it isn't about reading chart patterns, it's about deep judgment, character, and sniffing out those hidden risks.
In the end, this whole story reveals a really profound truth about finance. The numbers can lie. The stats can be manipulated. So you can't just judge the strategy or the spreadsheet. You have to judge the character of the person who's behind it all. Which leaves us with one final, fascinating question to think about. If we know the market is this weird mix of perfect logic and random wandering, a genius and a drunk, how do we ever decide when to follow its wisdom and when it's time to trust our own judgment instead?